Imagine, if you will, knowing that at some point in time, your favorite race in Warcraft had an ability so fun and unique that while it didn't create any kind of advantage for you and possibly hindered your ability to function, it did give flavor and a new edge to the way you played World of Warcraft. Maybe it was a kind of special class ability like priests get, depending upon their race, or maybe it was a weapon skill increase of some kind that changed your weapon priorities. Such is the case for plains running for the Tauren. If that open wasn't subtle enough, don't worry, there's more. Welcome to Ancient Lore, a discussion series where we peel back the layers of world building and story to examine, understand, and discuss where we came from in the World of Warcraft. Today's topics are the lost races, classes, and abilities that could have been. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below or connect with me on my Discord. We're setting subtlety aside for this one. You very much knew that already from my sledgehammer grade introduction. We're going to be talking about not only the things that were cut or left out from Vanilla WoW when it comes to classes, races, or abilities, but also what I feel should have been included for lore or gameplay reasons. I will be going into a bit of speculation on this, and referencing a few things from the RTS games that either never made the cut or were implemented incorrectly. I'll also be including a few things that I would have liked to see included or implemented in some way for our player characters. With the introduction, you know where we're going to be starting. Tauren plains running. I'll apologize in advance that I don't have any video of plains running, so enjoy the scenic Thunderbluff vistas during this. Slated to be the Tauren version of having a mount, plains running was available to all Tauren during the early betas of Vanilla, and was the ability to start running and gradually build up speed over time, about 10 seconds. There were a lot of issues with their initial attempts at implementation, and Blizzard gave up on it pretty quickly. However, it was such a stellar idea, and implementation of it could have easily been worked on. But, as with many pieces of cut content during Vanilla's development, time was against the developers, and a lot needed to be shaved off for them to make their launch window. In a fun postscript to this, Turtle WoW adopted plains running, balanced it, refined it, and made it available to Tauren if they wanted to use it at level 40. It's a really fun and sometimes useful ability, and while not a full replacement for having a mount, just having it adds so much flavor to the race. Speaking of adding flavor to the Tauren, and not in a salt, pepper, butter, 4 minutes on each side kind of way, there were initial plans to include wearable and equipable totems for the race that represented the different tribes. In Warcraft 3, most Tauren units, chieftains and warriors, had totems of some kind. There were plans to include these in World of Warcraft, as we can see harness vendors in both Orgrimmar and Thunderbluff, but progress was never really made on them. Totem weapons got even less love, sadly, as they were never explored as far as I understand. A tragedy, as all of these should have been implemented and would have given the Tauren so much life and diversity. There were other possible combat features that never saw the light of day, or in the case of this next point, did see the light, and many of us wish it really hadn't. Mounted combat was something that had been a thing in the Warcraft universe since the original RTS, with groups of knights and wolf riders clashing on the battlefield. Blizzard had been looking for a good way to implement mounted combat since the early stages of WoW's development, and eventually included in Wrath of the Lich King with the Argent Tournament. It was clunky, barely functional, and only had a purpose at the tournament grounds itself. In short, it wasn't the mounted combat we had seen in the RTS at all, and as a personal point, I really didn't like it. While I recognize the challenge with implementing combat on mounts, I feel like I have a solid idea for how to implement them. Let's just speculate here. At 60, you should get access to a short quest line that trains you to fight while on your mount in outdoor areas only, with each mount giving you a specific small buff to your overall stats or combat performance. It should be more than a single stat, and the difference should be noticeable, with a greatly reduced chance or no chance of being dismounted when struck. This would have the added side benefit of giving people a greater reason to grind for other races' mounts for those different bonuses, and give an added value to mounts that drop in instances and raids. In the realm of different equipable weapons and weapon styles, let's cover a few all at once. One thing I feel would have added a lot of value to the weapon class would have been one-handed spears, or more appropriately called pylums. This would have added a lot of flavor and variety to the weapon class, making them more than a hunter stat stick for 99% of players, but unfortunately requiring a whole slew of new animations and skeleton work to be functional. What wouldn't take any of that would have been any kind of development for unarmed and fist weapons. At one point in a future expansion, rogues and I think shamans got a little bit of this, if I remember right, but it wasn't anything close to bringing the skill into fully fledged usefulness. Having a brawler or street fighter class, or spec, would have been stellar. In a slightly more memey vein, and in a shout out to all the Soulsborne players out there, give us dual-wield shields already. Yes, it's a joke of an idea. Yes, we'd make even more Captain America jokes. And yes, it'd be ridiculous and fun all at the same time. Bringing us slightly back to reality, another gear-based option we really should have seen at some point was the ability to manipulate your armor proficiencies. While in WoW Classic they're very much locked in, and in retail they're essentially meaningless because you're constantly being provided gear that just fits your armor skill, what would have been really interesting would have been ways of altering what armor skill you have access to in exchange for benefits or drawbacks. For example, Fury Warriors not getting plate skill because they needed to move fast and hit hard, but in exchange, getting a passive bonus to agility and strength. Or Enhancement Shamans getting a talent that gives them plate skill, but locks them out of their lightning and chain lightning abilities. With some classes getting a level 40 chain to their armor skill, there could have been so much more flavor to this mechanic, but sadly it was never explored. There were a few actual classes that, sadly, were never implemented in World of Warcraft. The first of which being Necromancers. It's true, I'm a bit of a sucker for Necromancers and Shadow classes in general, but I feel this is a legitimate point. And sure, Necromancers generally serve the Lich King, a primary antagonist in World of Warcraft, but to say there aren't Necromancers or Shadowcasters that have broken off from the Scourge is just silly. In addition, Warlocks exist, a type of spellcaster that was actually banned from the Horde, as well as also declared illegal by Dalaran, but allowed to continue their work because they're fighting fire with fire. This would have also added a lot more flavor to the game as our fight against the Lich King escalated, requiring these deathly allies to confront some hard truths about their profession and past. Another class that absolutely should have been implemented with Vanilla would have been the Tauren Chieftain, with Dwarven Mountain Kings being the Alliance version of them. Most of the abilities from these two hero classes in Warcraft 3 were folded into warriors eventually, but I'd like to take this thought in a different direction than just copying from the RTS. Both these hero classes represent leadership for their people, and their implementation into WoW would represent that with skill sets and abilities that enhance and amplify group dynamics while also adding powerful melee abilities. Think the difference between a champion and a captain in Lord of the Rings Online. This would have the added benefit of not including Dwarven or Tauren Paladins, both of which were absolute mistakes. But that goes into my rant on how Paladins were implemented, and that's a whole episode in and of itself. Whether or not we got a leadership class, another mechanic that should have been expounded upon in World of Warcraft was auras. As it is, Paladins are the only class that really got to play around with auras. Totems were a similar thing, but less reliable, and because of their placement mechanics, felt frustrating. There were other amazing auras and group effects in Warcraft 3 that we can reference for this too. Endurance Aura, Brilliance Aura, and Unholy Aura are some of the best. These ideas and ways of improving a group performance would have done so much to increase lesser played classes' utility and cohesion when in parties, as well as added more subtle flavor to most classes. Referencing not just Warcraft 3, but also Warcraft 2 as well, Dispel used to be a lot more powerful. Summoned units used to have a very serious vulnerability to Dispel, with the mass Dispel that Tauren Spiritwalkers had in particular being impressively potent, obliterating groups of summoned units before they could do any serious harm. In turn, this would have given priests even more utility, as well as a stronger way to fight the undead, which should still count as summoned units, as many of them are held together by the Lich King's will, or some kind of latent magical energy. There are also a few races that should have seen some kind of vanilla or expansion implementation. This is one of the areas I only have a few thoughts on, because so many races ended up getting implemented, and from the sounds of the possible Warcraft Awakening rumors, Blizzard may be rectifying here in the near future. High Elves and Ogres, both being hinted at for a Classic Plus expansion, would have been incredible to see in a vanilla release. While with Blood Elves we did get a version of the former, with the latter we only saw a quick April Fool's gag with the two-headed Ogre class. Ogres would be a serious struggle with certain armor types and would require some adjustment, but both make a lot of sense for each faction. High Elves were at one point in time a part of the Alliance of Lordaeron, and rekindling that allegiance would be a matter of establishing a line of communication and transportation through the Plague Lands. For Ogres, they were brought into Azeroth with the Horde during the beginning of the Second War, with a few tribes of Ogres still respecting Horde leadership. Another race that was heavily discussed and speculated on was Naga. While Naga would be missing the leg and feet slot for armor, and lore-wise, finding a group of Naga that would be willing to work with the mortal races poses a challenge, a lot of people wanted to see a playable Naga faction. I'm not sure if Blizzard ever actually experimented with this, it wouldn't surprise me, but the mountain of challenges that they'd have to overcome to make this potential fan favorite a reality made it a near impossibility from the start. The rumors about playable Naga were reignited with Cataclysm and the first real underwater zone, but never went anywhere. Speaking of never going anywhere, and our final point on this wish we had list, was the original Kul Tiras. In Battle for Azeroth, Kul Tiras was the point of focus for the Alliance, but it was, as I've previously described, incredibly poorly written and bloated. The real Kul Tiras would have been an absolutely tiny island nation, the largest in a series of small islands off the coast of Cosmodan and the southern kingdoms. Forced to live off its wits, its mercantile fleet, and a dedication to the Alliance, the fact that we didn't get to see this scraggly island city-state and instead got an absolute mess of massive zones that outsized every other human nation was an absolute shame. Kul Tiras is the prime example of quantity does not equal quality, especially with WoW. I'm certain I've forgotten some things when writing this. I've only had so much brain space, sadly. So feel free to leave a comment with your favorite thing that should have been included in Vanilla WoW. No restrictions. As long as it makes some kind of sense with the story and the world, let's have a bit of fun with this. We close this book of Warcraft history here and save the rest for another time. If you've enjoyed this feature, please consider subscribing here at youtube.com/thedannation, as well as joining my Discord at tinyurl.com/danscord. It's a Discord, but with 100% more Dan. A big thank you to Turtle WoW, where most of the visual footage you see during this episode was recorded at, as well as having provided the backing track for this piece. In addition, thank you to those who have signed up for memberships here on YouTube. Your financial support is greatly appreciated. From the Lore Bunker here in Boston, Massachusetts, this is Dan wishing you a wonderful and wide, wide world of lore.